Very warm welcome, everybody. I'm Catherine Barker and I'm chair of the group. I'm very pleased to welcome some members of the public to join us today. Actually, 7 management trainees who are working either with us or with other parts of the system. And we have the governor and another government as well. So very warm welcome to you all. We have one apology from Linda Kennedy, otherwise we are all here as our first, actually, permanently formed group board. So from the chair, I must say it's a relief to be reduced from 31 to something of a more manageable number around the table. And very delighted to see everybody here today. Any declarations of interest that we need to be aware of today? In which case, I'm going to hand straight over to Steve to introduce our colleagues who come to share the patient story with us from Macmillan. So, warm welcome to all of you in particular. Over to you, Steve.
Thanks, Chair. I'm really delighted to welcome and introduce today's patient story, and to welcome Emma, Liz, and Arthur. And they're from the Macmillan team at the T sites. We're going to go straight to just the first presentation. I'm just going to give just a little bit of background about why they're here, and then we'll go to the story. Over to you, Emma.
Thank you. So I'm Assistant Chief Nursing Officer for Cancer. So Liz, one of my main volunteers at the Macmillan Wellbeing Centre, Miss Arthur, who's the manager at the Wellbeing Centre. So emotional support is at the heart of compassionate care, and it's at the heart of what the Wellbeing Centre does, provides support for people affected by cancer, but not just them, their family and their supporters. And they do that by offering information and advice, but also just time in a place that's lovely. And I hope you can all spend some time there and visit us. It's lovely. So it supports people across the BNSSG area. And we're really trying to support people to manage their own care needs, but equally come for support as and when they're needed. We will also, the team will liaise with other members of the team, both within MBT and UHBW and BPOP, but also the community as well, to ensure we get the care for the person that they need, and ultimately to provide seamless care. So Liz is one of our amazing volunteers. She actually leads the craft sessions that we provide at the Wellbeing Centre. They're powerful, and you'll see that in the video, I think. And just the feedback of these 4 patients, I think, will give you a flavour. And the time to reflect about whether this approach could be taken up elsewhere in the trust as a way of making patients.
Right, let's go to the story.
Okay. So I was diagnosed with cancer, breast cancer in 22 March. And to start off with, I didn't come here much. I was just piled on with the treatment, and I was very much focused with the treatment. But then as I went in, my marriage started to break down, and I became a bit of a mental wreck, to be honest. I've always been a strong person, been able to just power on and do my own thing, 2 wonderful children. But at that point, I didn't know how to be. And the first time I reached out, I spoke to Arthur on the phone. It was fantastic. And then I started coming in little bit by little bit, and they offer so much help and support. We were just a cup of tea and a chat, and they understand. And they've got all these wonderful leaflets that they can send you home with. So from there, they've really helped me just through talking. They've had me have sessions with Bupa for care. They've had financial advice, and the physios down here, and Liz with her art sessions. Oh my gosh, it was a little poster I think out one day saying about art once every month, and I was thinking, I don't think that I'm well enough to do it yet. I don't think that I'm well enough. And then when I found a point where I felt well enough to do it, I mentioned it to the girls and then put my name down, and Liz phoned me up. And as soon as Liz phones you, you're just engulfed in this, you just wrapped up. She does everything. She plans it, she organises it. I don't know where she comes up with the ideas. It's amazing. And the ladies here, you know, when you go through the journey, your brain is just, well, my brain anyway, is on constant overdrive with everything. There's no time out, there's no escape. You come here, 2 hours, sat around a table, and we're all in the same boat, and we're all just there to zone out and enjoy life. And it's almost like meditation. You're almost healing whilst you're there. It's exhausting. I'll go home and I'll sleep for the rest of the day. But what I get from it is healing. And since I've been coming, my mental space and my physical have improved so much. The combination of the services that I've had, psychotherapy, the living well course in the room as well, and the arts, it all plays such a big part in finding how to live again. Before cancer, I wouldn't have understood any of this. But once I've reached that, and it was for me the mental side of things, it's been so, I mean, the cancer treatment was brutal, but it was treatment. It made me better, but it made me worse mentally. It was only a couple of weeks ago, and I said, you know, I think I've entered phase 2 of my recovery, which is amazing. And I'm so grateful. I would not be here today without the help and support that I've had.
So at the beginning of the year, I think what we can do. So it needs to be something I can do. It needs to be relatively easy to put together. We don't want it to cost too much, but we don't want to be seen as being mean either. And I take a lot of my ideas from the internet. The internet, so I mean, it's just stuff for craft, and people do wonderful things. But I keep it at a level that people come to the workshop so that they can achieve something. A lot of them have never done craft. Some of them are actually very good at craft, and they help the others as well who are maybe struggling a little bit. But generally speaking, I try and keep it relatively simple so that we can achieve it in the time that we've got. We do have 2 hours, and you can actually do quite a bit in 2 hours. Over the years, we've done quite a lot of different ones. I try and do something different every time. But we've done, we've taken a terracotta pot, painted it, and then crafted it up. We've done a whisk dragonfly, which they really enjoyed. We've done a bookmark, we've done origami, we've done sun catchers, pop-up cards. There was a wedding over in one of the wards, and they came across here and borrowed some of the paper flowers, some of the small ones, and made them into a little posy, and that was used to both ends. It's a nice spot to relax and try and forget about all the clinical stuff. I mean, they do have to put themselves out to get here as well. Besides the craft workshops, like the usual meet and greet and make the tea and the coffee and keep the plants alive. And but yes, this is a regular feature now. Once a month.
I came here, I met the staff here really nice. And then I got the appointment from Sophie Physiotherapy. And then I was sitting where you sitting now. And then I'm looking for all the newsletter here behind me. I said, where is the crop one? So I talked to the reception Sam, and I said that I would like to go there because it feels like now is I'm not alone for this journey, you know, that I got someone, somebody will understand my situation. Since then, I love it. My third session today, and then I really love it. And then that is the good thing for this group. See, you forget everything. I got to know anyone. It's make build up your confidence. I said because sometimes my confidence is the rock bottom. You know. No, I really appreciate what he's doing with this craft.
It's so nice to come here to the hospital for something good. And it helps the next time you have to come to the hospital for something not so good.
And I get to stage where I just don't want to think about it anymore. So to do actually something which is positive, have a giggle, is refreshing. It's good for me.
It's a safe place, isn't it? We share things. And whether it's people that have been coming for 2 years or it's somebody new, we all feel like we're friends.
Appointments coming to a hospital are anxious times for people anyway, and they get very associated with hospital anxiety and that kind of almost crisis moment that people have when they come in here. So offering an alternative place where the people can gather mindfully and take part in the craft session. You don't have to have levels of knowledge of expertise or anything, but just being within a group of people who actually get why you're there and having that opportunity to check in with people, have conversations, and the conversations vary hugely, and offering support, offering advice, tips, techniques of people who are in similar situations is very, very important to us. Just putting the patient at the centre of things, it is quite important here. It's exactly what we're doing, and we hope to continue that with some more group events that we are putting on in the Wellbeing Centre as well. So we try not to ask people who are coming into our doors what they're here for. We will offer them a cup of tea about 5 times, and generally we get to why they're here, or indeed if they just want to have an opportunity to chat, we can offer that space as well and support. Having a focal point like the table up there is brilliant. They know where to go now, and as we saw earlier, they fit 12, 15 people around that very, very easily. It's knees and elbows together, and it's such a great space. We don't have to help do anything. It does it itself. Whether people are coming here for years, or as we have today, people who come for the first time, they're automatically embraced into the group. People find out about each other. It's such a lovely environment. But sometimes I stand back from the office at the other side and just watch to see how things can organically grow. And people help each other. I think there's that compassion within people, not only for the group that they are surrounded by, but for themselves too. And that's why Women is coming to the centre for the craft session to show a bit of self-compassion. That in turn boosts their emotional resilience. One of the main things that people are confused by is what happens next. A simple conversation with us really puts people's minds at rest.
It's so powerful, it's so welcoming, it's everything and more. It's meditation, it's healing, it's a safe space, everything.
Yes, a couple of things to say for me then, questions, but our partnership with Macmillan and other charities is incredibly across the group, and I think this just demonstrates how valuable that connection with our charity, the SE sector, is. Thanks to our incredible volunteers, both MBT and UHBW, for the time they give, the tireless time that they for patients, but also our colleagues as well. And also it demonstrates the power of connection and person-centeredness, how valuable that is. And you heard, I feel confident it's almost healing whilst you're there and not alone in this journey. And whilst our colleagues give that through Patients Pathways, actually what this has demonstrated is a real opportunity to do something a lot more than that. And for those women particularly going through that cancer, that has clearly been very important for them. So there are a few other slides which is about kind of next steps, but I think it'd probably be more valuable having a conversation with the chair rather than going through those. But thank you. Actually, there's an example of a bouquet of flowers just here. Liz, were these yours or were they? Yeah, Liz to make. There you go. Great, yes. Yes.
This is made of one for each of you to take when you
There
leave.
you go.
You can take it with you and chew on breakfast.
Oh, thank you.
So I have a bunch at my desk. Yeah. Thanks, Chair.
Incredibly powerful and moving, but over to colleagues for any thoughts you want to share on that.
Thanks so much. I had actually watched it at home and I'm glad I did because it is so moving and but seeing it a second time. A few things struck me. It's just how powerful it is and the ability for us to extend that ethos into some of our ward environments as well as people coming over into the centre or centres, you know, but that we've got at other sites. And whether there's any kind of sharing of, you know, the learning that you have from it back into the wards that we can sort of capitalise on, or have you already done that?
It's definitely something we'd like to do.
Yeah.
I think we've achieved this and we've got to such a good standard that now we can think about the next stage. That's kind of where our next steps are really, and then sharing it across the whole trust group.
We do have a cancer navigator within acute oncology as well, who does visit patients on oncology patients under ward. And during that meeting group, just letting them know that there is a holistic support there as well alongside the medical model, which is quite invaluable.
What we do have volunteers embedded throughout both of our organisations who will support with activity, particularly in elderly care, frailty. See some great work in Weston. They have activity coordinators there who have again just been incredible. It work with flowers, but it's games and all sorts of things. So again, the power of our volunteers is just incredibly important. But again, I've seen that across both organisations.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for the seminar. That's an incredible story. I know the really good work that goes on in Centre NPT, but obviously elsewhere across us. I suppose the difficult question is ongoing funding. So when times are tight, as they are in NHS and across public services, we often have to make difficult decisions around working with voluntary sector partners, for example. We've seen the power of this service and how important it is to patients and experience. So perhaps a question for Steve about how we continue to make the case for this really important service continuing and to give some peace of mind, I suppose, to people who will want to use it and to our staff.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. This service is incredibly important, but has been going for some time. And something I think both organisations have invested in. Whilst I don't have the number, I'm sure there is a number that says for every pound we invest in voluntary sector type activity, we probably get double that, if not triple, if not quadruple that back. So using our voluntary sector and supporting them and building capacity in the voluntary sector will be something that's very important to us. We saw that earlier this week, in fact, in terms of the CPG and how the voluntary sector was supporting that. So very keen for that to be developed.
Thank you, Chair. What a powerful story, and Liz, thank you very much for giving up your time and having such an impact on our patients. And I actually had a question for you. I mean, you interact with so many patients, and I was wondering, are there any barriers, non-clinical barriers that you're seeing, could be linguistic, cultural, digital, that you feel is affecting how patients understand their treatment or have access to it? I'm just wondering, maybe with your separate set of eyes, you're noticing something that maybe we're not seeing as trust and stuff.
When they come, they just simply enjoy themselves. There doesn't seem to be any barriers or anything like that at all.
When people do come to the first craft sessions, it takes, as was said in the video there, it takes a lot of consideration beforehand to make that step in. And coming into, I think with the name Macmillan over the door is quite difficult to walk through anyway, and reaching out to looking for support. So perhaps that kind of introduction into holistic care and promotion of self-management is a bit of a barrier in itself, but it's a very medicalised and has to be medicalised acute hospital. That holistic care alongside it being another approach as well, if that could be eased into the kind of pathways also.
Thanks very much. Really powerful. And what struck me was actually what you just said is right. This holistic isn't just about physical recovery, is it? It's emotional health and well-being. And what I was really struck by things, people worrying about money, you know, and that you could signpost them. And so your links must be amazing to the voluntary sector to feel that you can scoop people up. I mean, it's really powerful, and that doesn't come easily. My question is, I think women are notoriously bad about walking through the door, but men are even worse. So my challenge is there something similar for men's health and men's groups that you are either doing or thinking about doing?
So we work with a lot of patient-led support groups throughout cancer services, and with the biggest successes that we've had over the last number of years with the Bristol-based prostate cancer support group called Prospect, and we supported them in providing that room there, as you just saw, as well for their meetings. And it started off with a very much an invitation-only basis, and only 2 people came to the first, second, and third meetings. We had a bit of a rethink with their chair about that, and leaving it very, very casual, as in we meet here on the third Tuesday of every month at 2 o'clock to 4 o'clock. Come if you can. I think then words of mouth got out around about that. On the kind of drop in, there's no expectation that you should be there. And now we get 20, 30 people in the present. So it is trying everything for like, there's a kind of misnomer that men don't talk about feelings. It's rubbish. I think it's providing the right environment.
Mark,
Thank you, Liz, Emma and Arthur. I think that was really a powerful video, but also the work, and those flowers are amazing, by the way. They're fantastic. A couple of thoughts I had. One was around, if it doesn't already happen, I think having students in placement with you in this environment, particularly in a holistic environment, whether that's occupational therapy, it could be any students actually, be really powerful thing. The partnership between Macmillan and the trust is so powerful. So that's one consideration, and I think that's would be important for students to see that side, because they may want to aspire to have roles, to have positions in either the organisation or the charity itself. And the second bit is how do we really push the research or push the outcomes of this work? How do we help do that broadcast? The video is fantastic, it's really powerful, the narrative, but the kind of research, the kind of evidence-based impact on people's lives. I think that's really important, and I think finding a way of doing that, which could then feed into future bids for money or for funding, but actually more than that, it's about being able to do the digestible way that helps people understand also the fantastic work that's going on in this environment. But well done, seriously, it's excellent work.
Yeah, so within cancer services, we have a patient experience lead, and would be something that we could explore indeed.
Patient experience lead, we've got a patient engagement group as well, rotating these days of discussions with them. I was thinking about linking up with Arts and Referral, because they've got a lot within the trust as well. We're doing different things, that we've just set up a pilot for doing Nordic walking. We're just trying to think differently about how art's one thing, but physical activity is another. We have cancer support workers at all of our, and the same with BHOC as well, cancer support workers in all our cancer sites. And so they all know about this. They come to the centre pretty much on a daily basis. We have a regular meeting with them. So anything that's created or new in the centre, they know about. And they're part of it. And often they're the guinea pigs of when we start. So we've all been on a Nordic walking session. And, you know, because actually you can say it with more feeling if you've done it yourself. Yeah, we try all sorts of ways. We're linking really closely with our community partners as well, Athley Health locally. Macmillan, we've got an Improvement Cancer Journey project manager in the community in the ICB. So we are thinking of trying to do all things, but I think, like I say, perhaps sharing this video more widely across the trust will really help.
Absolutely.
We're trying hard for everyone to know where that wellbeing centre is. It's a beautiful space, but it's a big step, as Arthur said, to get people through the door. It's you know, scary, isn't it?
Fantastic. I think we're pretty much in awe of the impact of what you're doing. I mean, we all know the interplay of physical and psychological mental health is enormous, and your ability to see the whole person and their family and their wider network, it's all, you know, it's all linked together, isn't it? And what you're doing is making such positive impact for people. So thank you. I think it would be great to learn from this for other parts of our services. And Mark, I'm sure you're right, research around outcomes impact will help to make a case for a return on investment.
Research sounds scary.
It's absolutely got us here. It's good. This has grabbed our hearts. We need to find ways of it, you know, reaching our heads with the hard-nosed case as well, but it's phenomenal. Liz, you're a wonder, thank you. And thank you for the time that you give, you and all the other volunteers. We've said it many times before, but it really does make a huge difference in impact. So thank you. And by the way, I want to see what a whisk dragonfly is. Imagine what that might look like, but maybe I'm coming to visit soon, so maybe I'll get to see it.
100%. There's another plug, it's a big Christmas fair. There's done an awful lot. She starts with all the whole year. So the big Christmas fair. So.
Lovely. Well, thank you very much, and thank you for giving us your time. So it's from the inspirational onwards to the minutes, from the 8th of July meeting, which was our meeting at the Health Living Centre in Weston. Are there any amendments, first of all, that anybody wants to make to those minutes? No? Okay, so we'll take them as a fair record and move on to the action log. We have an outstanding item about the no criteria to reside in the separate risk on the back on the board insurance framework. So that's in hand, I am sure. And also board work plan in terms of reference, reconciling the agenda. So I think that element can be closed.
Through the end of the set.
Thank you. Any other matters arising that people want to pick up in that meeting or those minutes? Okay, in which case we'll move on to questions from the public. We haven't received any questions in advance in writing, but if anybody has come with a burning point to put to the board relating to today's agenda, now is your moment. Thank you. So let's go on then to the chair's report. First of all, I would just like to say congratulations to our newly appointed group non-executive directors. So the non-execs who are around the table today, and Linda, who's unable to be with us today, gone out all joint appointments across both trusts, as are of course our most of our executive colleagues. So congratulations and great to have you with us, but I also just wanted to say a big thank you to our departing Neds as well, who have made an enormous contribution, some of them over a really long period of time, and I know some of us are going to be gathering with them later this week, so thank you and farewell, but I just wanted to acknowledge you to the contribution that they've made as well. Yeah, I've been doing a number of internal visits. I suppose I would highlight a really fruitful time I spent with some of our consultants from NBT. That was a really interesting dialogue and very much valued having that conversation with your colleagues, Tim. The walkabout appeal, some of us got our lycra on, some of us didn't. But it was great to launch that appeal, which is making an enormous difference, getting people, mostly people who suffered from strokes and mobility issues as a result of that, up and running early. It's also really important in terms of effective use of therapist time, because instead of having to have 4 people helping somebody to learn to walk again. One therapist can do it, releasing time for others to be doing something with other people. So really worthwhile appeal. If you haven't donated, please do. So it was really good to be able to support that. Big highlight of my month this month has been the first meeting of the community participation group. It's referenced a number of times in different papers today. Steve and I were there. One of our governors, Paul, was there as well, so really good to have their support. There were about 17 people there. They've been recruited from a really diverse range of communities and backgrounds, and they are either community activists, experts by experience as a result of using our services, third sector advocates, Health Watch, governors, and the MET patient and carer group as well. So we had our very first meeting down at the Watershed. The idea behind this group is that they will enable us to connect to the people in the communities that we serve far more effectively, so that we can genuinely co-produce with them the work that we do around particularly the rollout of the clinical strategy, but there are touch points for any planning that we do that is going to make sure that we understand and are responsive to what matters most for the people that we serve, and that is after all why we're here. So a hugely important group, great first meeting, and I think you'd agree it was really inspirational. So yeah, we will be talking more about that again and again, I think. But for me, that feels like a game changer, actually, for the way that we work. We've also had, I've also been involved with different partners. We hosted Carla Denny, the local MP, on a visit to the Community Diagnostics Centre. I went to see our old colleague Susan Hamilton in her guise as Chief Executive of St Peter's Hospice. Great to see St Peter's. Going to be following that up with some visits to our own palliative care services to see how we can better link up and partner. Another joint visit with the Chair of Serona, this time to UHBW services, again, really importantly to foster mutual understanding of the challenges and the opportunities that our two sets of services have, and how we can better partner with one another. I'm just going to leave it at that, I think, but I'm very happy, as I'm sure Martin and Sarah are, to pick up on any points from the report if anyone wants to hear anything. It is for information, so we'll in that case note and move on to Maria's report.
Thank you. Key bits, we've got a written report, but just to update on a couple of areas. So kind of related topics, the new provider capability assessment, which has just been launched as a process whereby a mixture of self-assessment and some rounding and triangulation by NHS England. And this was sit alongside the already trialled national oversight framework segmentation process. We have had the first public segmentation has come out today, which is very, very positive for us in Bristol, with UHBW being in segment 1 and 13th in the country, NBT in the second segment at, depending on which journal you're reading, 24th or 29th, I go 24th, I think, that's the day. But that's incredible, actually, the people of Bristol receiving by you know any means of reckoning some really, really good services. I would say that they are still testing the weighting, so things will change as they go through, but we're getting a good idea of what the focus is, so lovely to see where we are. And of course that as we go forward, looking into the world of foundation trusts, etc., going forward, for existing and potentially new foundation trusts under 10-year plans, says we all have to be part of the foundation cost by 2035, and it's very likely that that will be tied to being segments 1 and 2. So that's a very good place for us to be. A couple of other documents that I allude to in terms of the insightful board, and actually the assessment that we're doing, I think fits in with a number of our own capability assessments, along with the due diligence process we're doing around exploring merger status, for example. Second thing I wanted to mention is that you'll be aware that there have been a number of changes as DHSC and NHS England come together, and there's been a review of both region and ICB, and a model blueprint has been published in both cases. In essence, the region will be looking after strategic leadership, which means planning, investment, reconfiguration, mainly performance management and improvement and intervention where needed. ICB will be responsible for this year, particularly winter planning, but generally will move to a place of strategic commissioning. Now, strategic commissioning has lots of definitions at the moment. How far into research innovation, for example, that will go, we're unclear. So I think that is still being worked through. However, we have been, I think the sign off now for the new configuration of ICBs has gone through. We are going, BNSSG will partner with Gloucester. The first stage was clustering with an expectation, depending on what the process is going to be for this, by merging by 27. So that is in line with getting to the spend per head of the population that has been described, about £19 per head. And this is where the configurations have come about. That's not to say there may not be potential for further review, depending on patient flows and whether people are really able to deliver what they need to within that envelope. I've also wanted to confirm Dr. Jeff Farrer's appointment as chair of the new combined BNSSG Gloucestershire ICB, previously chair of BNSSG, so well known to us here, and we send our congratulations. You'll be aware we've had a recent period of industrial reaction by our resident doctors. We acknowledge the right, obviously, to take such action. It was very well planned for, with minimal disruption, although clearly there are impacts both financially and on having to move or delay some activity. So do want to thank all those colleagues whose collective efforts allowed us to proceed with business as usual as much as possible. There's also going to be a BMA ballot on consultant strike potentially as well. What has come out has been a 10-point plan whereby boards are going to be asked to assess themselves in readiness for how we improve the working lives of doctors. So the 10-point plan advocates that we have a resident doctor rep and a consultant rep who will come to the board regularly as part of the Guardian of Safe Working. So in the next 6 weeks, we will have populated that action plan to send back in. And I think already we've fairly convinced we've got most of it in place. So that's positive news. Slightly less positive, but NBT, we have been the tiering moved into tier 2. The tiering system gets very confusing. Sometimes as you go up, it looks better, and as you go down, it can change. On cancer, moving into tier 2 is a deterioration, unfortunately, mainly around urology and breast. But we are focusing on those two as improvement areas. And UHBW, we remain in tier 1 for quarter 2, so very positive there. The new surgical centre, named the Bristol Princess Royal Bristol Surgical Centre, took possession of that a couple of weeks ago now. Patients are in through the door, so really good news again across Bristol, and focusing on 6,500 extra procedures per year. And a key part of our extended social capacity. It's also been reaccredited as a veteran aware trust, and that makes sure that patients from armed forces aren't disadvantaged when it comes to accessing health care. And I know that's something that staff involved are very proud to be part of. The only other thing I wanted to pull out was just about very important expectation on boards that we are taking further action to identify and act against perpetrators or potential perpetrators of sexual misconduct in the NHS. That's something that's been quite a focus in the last 18 months. And we've put a lot of effort through HR departments and some of our staff groups and networks to ensure that we are really holding ourselves to account in that. I think the rest of it is self-explanatory, but I have to take any questions.
Thank you, Marie. Just a pause to say the outcome for us on those metrics around the segmentation and the rankings is really excellent, and it could be great if we can keep that. I mean, it's good news because it's good news for our people that we serve, and it is encouraging for our colleagues. So it is, yeah, great news. So, and big thanks and congratulations to the executive team actually for getting us to that point. Just wanted to highlight that. Colleagues, anything you want to explore further with Maria? Well, very clear. Thank you very much, Maria. Oh, Roy.
But like, just a very quick one. Thank you, Maria, for talking about the 10-point plan and what as a whole you're looking at to improve the well-being of the resident doctors. It's really more of an observation. We've got the point in the paper about the stop dropping parking changes and so on. And then the reality is we have to be aware that there is a very tactical tension sometimes between well-being and what we can and can't do. So there's no easy answer in resolving that, but I just,
I think we will know when it comes to staff interactions, it comes to parking.
Parking
we have biggest response, yeah. But of course, that's and thinking about working lives and what else we can do for resident doctors, non-pay incentives in particular. Actually, there's quite a lot that we are hearing from doctors that we could be doing, but perhaps we haven't thought about it in the right way. And local discounts and access to things, and just making sure that their working patterns tie in with a way of life and access to training. Those sorts of things are quite easily done, so we'll definitely be doing.
Richard.
Just going into tier 2 NBT for council, I mean, was it a surprise? I mean, I can't remember it being flagged as an issue last time in terms of the narrative around the KPIs.
Partly we have a 6-week lag on cancer reporting, so it always comes out a little bit after the event, but clearly not.
Yeah. With hindsight, we probably put a slightly ambitious plan in terms of our rate of recovery. So we are slightly behind the plan we set ourselves, and that is that we're assessing against that plan that we set ourselves. But to give an example of the two things we're measured on are 28-day diagnostic and 62-day treatment. We're 2.1% off on diagnostics, which is about 50 patients out of the 3,000 that we see each month, and on the 62-day we're 6.5% off. But that's only 26 patients that reach the we should have. So we have a route to get there, and it's around 2 specific cancer sites, and we are working hard to recover that. So we do expect to come out of this by the end of the year.
By the end of the calendar year.
I would absolutely say it's really disappointing with all the work we put in to help on that. So lots of effort focused on 2 years back again.
And now we just, yes, maybe small numbers, but they're still real people, as we saw earlier. So yeah, thank you for getting us right on the right person. So we'll see you next time. And what we'll be picking up nicely. Yeah, absolutely.
It's really interesting because it's, I'm glad you said small numbers, but those are patients with, and you know, a wait is obviously we don't want any patients waiting. One of the benefits of being in a group, obviously, is that we can help out each other. So, are there plans? Does your recovery plan include closer working with UHBW, or do you think you can recover it purely then Bristol?
Want to see what learning we can get from how UHBW are managing their cancer pathway, but they're on cancer sites that aren't treating UHBW, so it's urology and breast that are only done by the
Okay.
So quality committee will be keeping a keen eye on this and something we need to get as a group and we work on it. Anything else from this report before we move? Okay, in which case, Paula, group benefits realisation report, which also includes an update on the joint clinical strategy. Over to you, Paula.
Thanks. So this is the first of these reports into board, and it really is the way that we will put some hard edge onto our ability to evidence that we are over time having the impact we expect to have on our 4 Ps, our patients, our people, the populations we serve, and the public purse. The report this time, because we are still at relatively early days, we're having our board in place and our executives who lead on the different work streams in place from June. So the report really draws out the approach that we're adopting to provide the board with that oversight. There is a level of detail there provided almost as examples of the types of metrics that we will be tracking against our 5 strategic priorities under each of the work streams. But you'll see that there is work to do to finalise the baseline measures, the ambitions, the current trajectories that we want to work towards, because some of these will be quite incremental and some of them will be very quick wins. So there's a mix of measures where we're already making progress, and others that will develop over time. So the level of variation is not unexpected. It's something that I fully expected we would see at this point. And the intent is that by the next quarterly report, which will come to public board in January, that we'll have a fully populated report with those baselines established, etc. Alongside this, we are undertaking some independent evaluation work, as the board knows, and that is predominantly into our implementation of clinical strategy and whether working as a group fully enables us to deliver impact, particularly on our patients and people. And that work with the Health Innovation Network West of England has kicked off formally on the 1st of September. There is a level of variation in the sort of granularity of some of the metrics, some down at a clinical service level, particularly in cardiology, and others such as some of the metrics around our people or indeed being totally at organisational level. Over time, that work as we implement our joint clinical strategy and accelerate delivery of our group clinical services, which is one of the accelerated areas of focus, that will grow and will aggregate up so that we can see a bigger impact. And the other bit I wanted to draw out, and Neil and his team have done a lot of work, is that we've covered the financial benefits and tracking in this report as well, where we're at this stage in the year and the projection to the year ahead. And that does indicate that we've made some adjustments to revising both the cost investment and the benefit delivery in 25-26. And that's primarily down to 2 things, I would say. One, that the rigour of how we ensure we're not double counting between our internal trust savings plans, our SIPs, and the group savings is absolutely key. So we've been able to do more work to get that right. And the second is the more significant one, which is that when we developed our financial plan, we assumed 1.5% SIP baseline, and that the group savings would be in excess of that, when in actuality our saving our SIP targets in both organisations this year is 5%. So we've obviously had to make some adjustments for that. So that's reflected in the report. And there is an intent that as we develop this, that and hopefully for the next quarter, we have the opportunity to discuss the report in more depth in the relevant committees. So the various areas have been attributed to each of the committees, and that would follow the normal process that we can have those more in-depth discussions, and then the board gets the report and gets some of the assurance through the committee chairs, feedback into the board as we go forward. So we'll try to keep that moving in that direction to be able to achieve that. In terms of the joint clinical strategy then, I'm sure Tim will want to come in on this, but focus on 3 key areas: accelerating group clinical services, 4 services due to go ahead with the single leadership approach before Christmas, which is really good news. They have built on the learning, and you'll see some of the learning from cardiology reflected in the report. Clinical capacity and productivity diagnostic piece of work. So we've got lots of information about how we use our clinical capacity, how productive we are, national benchmark and model hospital as 2 individual organisations, but we haven't got it as a collective yet. So that work will help us do that and really take a gap analysis against a 10-year plan. Then that allows us to see where our key opportunities are. And alongside that, then really scoping out what left shift means and where we've got the biggest opportunities to go quickly, challenging and supporting our group clinical services to take us in that direction, but then also informing our next stages of developing a group clinical strategy. And 2 just milestones to note, refresh of the joint clinical strategy and all of that work on the 4th of November at an event, and that'll be a partnership event. And then the other milestone, Ingrid, you've already mentioned, which is the establishment of the community participation group, which is absolutely fundamental because we set out to do this in a way that was very much participative, co-designed, and I think we need to learn from that group about the wider stakeholder feedback and the impact we're making as a group, and so we need more work to do there. So happy to hear board views on the approach they're adopting, and hopefully you can see that there will be more detail to follow.
Thank you. So Sean, first off the blocks.
Thanks, Ingrid. Thanks for that. I'm just going to focus on the financial side. I think you sort of addressed it anyway. When I read this, I kind of got myself a little muddled around the savings of the merger versus SIP savings, and I just wonder if there's, just thinking about the committees that we're going to have that sit below the board, trust specific, if there's something in the role for those committees to, I get some assurance around what is SIP and what is this, and we can see it trust by trust, because I couldn't get my head quite around it in here. It's probably more me than what's written, to be honest. But it would be helpful, I think, to see that separately, and perhaps just trying to see the wood for the trees, because I can see that that would be difficult anyway. So it might be helpful. That was all.
And see Neil wants to respond.
Yeah, I was wondering, it was a point I was going to make, and Paula has described some of this. So I think there's quite a big distinction between how we've set things up for 25/6 compared with what we're doing 26/7. So these group benefits really came after we'd developed a lot of the trust level core, what I describe as core CIP. Yeah. Whereas next year, I would say that these group benefits will be the first part of the organisational-wide CIP plan for next financial year. Yeah. So it will be part of what we report. Right. I think from the off, you'll see these distinct schemes, and the intention is it should reduce what we have to ask of the rest of the organisation.
Yeah, that may not be the case given the pressure that is on SIP and on everything else. I just feel we need to make sure we're around that early doors, because once we get going, it'll be a nightmare to undo if we've got to go back and reinvent the wheel almost.
And that's understood, but it will be one plan rather than the 2 elements.
That's how that's made up. We've got that visibility and traceability.
Yeah.
Thank you.
My more medium longer term, I mean, the realisation plan goes out to 28, 29, 29, 30.
obviously we set all this out before the 10-year plan and the left shift, and particularly our hospital to community treatments. And I just wondered, I look at all these work streams, and you could kind of say, well, everything's going to get impacted by the 10-year plan going forward. So I just wondered, in the sense of what we were doing and our longer term plans, and you referenced it with regards to the joint clinical strategy, but just more generally, how much do you think is going to be impacted, or should it be impacted, and should we kind of need to reshape the kaleidoscope in terms of how those benefits realizations are going to shake out, bearing in mind that left shift?
Well, I think in terms, I mean, the biggest part of left shift is obviously going to be in our clinical services and how they operate. And then how we enable that through our corporate.
Well, also we could have a much reduced footfall coming through our hospitals.
Yes,
a lot of that thing happens in
so it's
so I just wondered, in the sense of how that benefits realization plan was looking, whether that needed a sort of a review.
Yes, across all of the work streams, and the impact of the 10-year plan will be factored in. That will be also able to be brought in as we progress our merger planning, because we want to deliver these group benefits, but we also want to use that to iterate and inform what we can do as a single organisation without some of the kind of constraints, if you like, of being two statutory organisations and having to follow particular kind of processes because we're separate. So that planning will begin to kind of dovetail in and allow us to refresh as we go through. I genuinely think that some of the biggest areas will be in our enablers. So we know that the digital strategy work that Neil's currently kind of taken through with our clinicians is really starting to factor in some of that thinking about, working differently than our state. What will the differences mean in terms of left shift for our state? What will it mean for working policies and practices, or how our people work and how we support them and make sure they're trained and developed, even if they're not.
No, I appreciate all that. It was just, what is the impact of that going to be on what we assumed initially was our plan?
I actually am really keen to see the 10-year plan delivery report coming through to really help inform that, and that's due imminently. So I think that will be down in the detail. That will really give us a stronger sense of the impact.
I think, Maria, did you want to respond to some of what's been said?
Yes, I will. I'm sure Tim will want to say a little bit about the idea of refreshing the dental strategy. When we first did it, we didn't have a 10-year plan. So I think now is the time to really fast track and accelerate what we're going to do. We've got some big targets in the 10-year plan. 70% of outpatient appointments been done outside of hospital. Our footprint will be a lot smaller going forward, actually, what we have to do with partners is develop a pathway so that we can move activity and resource, human and financial, support what we're doing. So we will have a very different estate strategy as we come together. Probably the best way of us being able to enact that is if we are able to become an integrated healthcare organisation, whereby we hold the budget on behalf of our local system and we're able to move money safely in partnership so that we're able to enact this big change that we need to see. But digital automation, people working different ways, wearables at home, all of that, if we now profile that into our joint clinical strategy, it's probably going to look very different than the 3-year ago version.
Roy.
Thank you, Chair. Paul, thank you. I think this is very clear, and I know this is going to be forward all the time, but it gives us a really good foundation to blueprint. I had a question about the financial side as well, in terms of savings from group benefit savings. We're calling out 3.6 million in this year, 4.4 in the next year, 2 million after that. So that's quite clear. I'm just thinking, given our budget, if you look at a percentage of savings for group benefits against the budget, it's quite a small percentage. I don't have a good sense of what good should look like in terms of, is there an expectation from NHS England when trusts before group all merge? This is the level, this is the percentage for efficiency savings. Do we have a sense of whether that's good? I accept the numbers and they are what they are, but is that within the bounds of what it should be. We haven't got people.
You wanted to respond, right?
Yeah, so partly I'll go back to the benefits case that we approved, and some of the discussion at that time I think was setting ourselves as a reasonable target in terms of what we believe could be achieved through group benefits alone. That was largely informed by work Tenio as our strategic partner had undertaken in terms of previous work at group level, also informed by a lot of the model hospital metrics around, for example, corporate services benchmarking. I think since that point, though, we have targeted a higher level of savings in terms of corporate services, again, partly informed by what we see going on around us in other parts of the NHS. And also, there's brief mention of this in the paper. We do foresee that there are further benefits from merger over and above what we can achieve as a group. That's estimated very high level at the moment at an additional £10 million. So we'll remain mindful of what's happening in other similar organisations, but it was informed by a stretch associated with benchmarking in the first place.
Is this on the same point, Martin? Is it not? No, okay. I'll go to Sarah then.
Thank you, and I think we've covered off some of the discussion about the joint clinical strategy, what I was going to ask about. So I was just going to ask a follow-up to that, really, the event that we have in the 4th of November, which sounds great, that we're revisiting that with colleagues. Where we're engaging with other organisations, are we ensuring that we're really engaging with clinicians and not with representative organisations that perhaps might be managerially led? I'm just concerned about talking to colleagues out in the community, whether they're really feeling like they're understanding what we're trying to do here. There's a lot of worry out there about the 10-year plan, and we could actually help provide quite a lot of reassurance and working together with colleagues. Have we got the right communication? Have we got the right engagement?
Thanks, Sarah. So it's something that I share too, and you'll know better than I do that within Bristol, talking to general practice, for example, it can be difficult to know who we're talking to at times. So we're trying really hard to do that. I think what the left shift is absolutely fascinating. It's a fantastic opportunity to get things right for patients. And what's really key for us in this refresh is we do this from a clinical epicentre, from a pathway clinical epicentre. So I appreciate it's very hard to foresee where the money is going to transact, ideally through an overarching organisation, which will make it less risky, less fearful for us. But we have to do this through designing the right clinical pathways. So what we are doing, for example, on the 4th of November, is we're saying to our dermatology colleagues, we want you to stand up and tell us how you can see this pathway working in a left shift manner. And we're inviting representatives from general practice, voluntary sector, community care, and others, and technology, and commercial. We're inviting those people to say, well, we can help you with that. We can provide that service. We can provide that facility. So I think as long as we do this from a clinical perspective with the patient at the core, we will get the right partner, and we will end up with the right financial settlement, albeit ideally in an integrated healthcare organisation. But thank you, and Sarah, I will always come to you and ask for you to sense check the people that we have invited to the 4th of November.
I'm not the expert. There are many people who are very well connected, but that's really reassuring to think. Thank you.
Mark, you've been waiting a while.
Yeah, lots of the points have been covered. Thank you. I think the reference to the IHO status is really important. And again, that wasn't with us 3 years ago. Just in summary, I really support the paper forward. I think it's a really, really clear paper. I think the ask that you are setting up in the paper, I certainly support it as well. A couple of points I had have been mentioned around the commercialisation from the element needs to be an enabler to all of this, whether it be the international work, commercialisation, the partnering with industries, for example, and the linkage through to economic growth and well-being across the region as well, because the two do go hand in hand. So that'd be my first point. again, this is taken as a snapshot in time, so I appreciate it's really hard to lock this stuff down. My other point is a bit more drilled in. I wondered whether you could just say a little bit more between the relationship between the HIM, the Health Innovation Network, and the drive of the cardiac kind of review. What led to that, and how are the leadership team being supported? Because if I look at the kind of 5.4, 5.5, they're quite new, aren't they? In post, it says, you know, they came in June. How are they being supported whilst the HIM is doing this piece of work? Because it could look to some to be a bit interesting, couldn't it? So just wanted to say a few words on that.
Yeah. So we are going to be, we are setting up a steering group with him so that we're, you know, we've got the opportunity to have this kind of deeper conversation. But it's actually been done in a very partnership way, although it has to have that level of independence, because that's what we want. It's still been done in a very partnership way. So although it's formally started on the 1st of September, the HIM team have been in speaking with the cardiology team for you know, quite a number of months actually, since we supported that we would go ahead with this the specific evaluation mark. So I don't think the team feel it's like a big brother approach being done to them. I think they are seeing it as genuine research.
Right.
They're a very research facing team anyway, as you know. So they're really embracing that opportunity to get involved in this. On a wider front, there is an OD support approach being taken, and particularly with them as the pathfinders, and they have sort of gone through a bit of a journey and become the first group clinical services. So that team also have internal access to support in them in their leadership journey and how they navigate their own way through.
Thank you, it's really helpful.
And Martin.
Yes, sorry, double point. Just coming back to the recommendations, you know, very supportive of the structure and the way we're going to devolve. I suppose the individual assurances back down to the committees. With returns then to the report that comes to the board, you know, it made me wonder whether we can, you know, perhaps have a more summary report coming to this board, you know, perhaps with a full one in the reading room and something that just lays out the key risks, mitigations, and sort of variances we plan, given that we've done, you know, most of that detailed work in committees.
Yeah. Thanks, Martin. That's my hope. Whether we get there for January or there's still a little bit work in progress, and I think we just see what stage we're at. But I was very conscious that I didn't know what I kind of debated including the appendix, quite honestly, as a level of detail. But I thought, given it's an approach for people to see, and then you have the assurance that committees are going to take that forward, and then if the board supported with that, that's exactly what we'll do.
So huge progress being made, as we can see in this report. But I think what's struck me is the need for urgency, like constant moving parts going on here, whether it's national policy or in local finances or whatever else. So agility, and then the other key thing that we absolutely need to know is partnerships, because we won't be able to realise the ambitions that we've got without those trusting partnerships. So this point's been well made. Let's go to the recommendations then. So we're being asked to note the approach to developing benefits realisation across the 8 local work streams and the way that those will report into committees, and it sounds like people very comfortable with that. We're also being asked to note the progress and the timeline for the first fully populated benefits realisation plan, which we'll see in January. And then finally, to note the progress on the joint clinical strategy implementation and the next steps. And it sounds like this event on the 4th of November is going to be an important part of reflective time with others on where we go with that. Okay, thank you. Let's move on. It is almost 15:15, and we were due to have a break at 15:15. Should we take it now, or do you want to take another item? Take it now? Right, quick break then. Okay, let's move on then to the next item, which is the board influence on the winter plan. And on the statement that has been submitted to an executive. So over to you, Glenn, to introduce.
Yes, so I'll introduce step into any of this. We've tried to write this as a joint paper. So there is a requirement as ever for us to put a winter plans into how we are planning the project into winter pressures. The energy we have asked this year for that to have all assurance, and there's a template in there that we've completed this to show all the steps that we have gone through. However, the timing that we need to solidify is in with the board meeting forward. So we are tomorrow. The two teams are heading down to Taunton to do some stress testing of the winter plans with the regional teams. We have engaged with the ITV and we plan on taking detailed papers through the plot in common at the end of the month. But then we need to submit before there is the next NBT board. So what we're asking is that the board delegates authority to Maria and Ingrid to sign off subject to satisfactory oversight by plot at the end of the month. The meat of the plan is on slide page 50 of the pack, where it shows that we're in a similar position in that the winter plan shows a shortfall. That shortfall is based on 85% occupancy, blue rates at the same level as last year, and with no criteria to reside remaining at the current stubborn levels rather than achieving the levels that the system gave us commitments to submit in the plan. So the two trusts that shows that we do have a bed gap. However, if we can get no criteria to resign back to the levels, then it mitigates the vast majority of that bed gap. Anything else wanted to add?
Martin?
Yeah, I almost asked at the beginning when we talked about putting no criteria to reside on our risk register, and I suppose it's what are the actual actions, and how is this going to give us some realistic hope that it'll change in a year? Otherwise, we're just signing off a plan that's doomed to fail, isn't it? Sort of thing.
Yeah, so we're working through the group has the system has a operational group and an executive group that is meeting weekly around bits of the work to try to improve this. We're also being supported by the NGC national team, the diagnostic, the discharge advisory group, and are also providing oversight into there. It's really difficult because these leaders are not within our gift. Some of them are. We have seen improvement in the P1 reduction in P1 demand, but it's the P2 and P3 that also remained stubbornly fine. And we are. I attended a executive meeting a couple of weeks ago to try to escalate and try and agitate to try to create more grids. And I think we need to get a report from that group formally to the system executive group to say that based on what we're seeing, and it could be that we use the winter plan because the winter plan has also got part of the big ICS winter plan, which will go through the system exec group, that we use that to reinforce the requirements to achieve this improvement in position.
Yeah, you touched on the part of that. We really need, I think, to be completely clear that we're doing everything we can on our part, with some sort of report that says, yes, we are, both supporting out hospital schemes, working towards whatever it might be, as fully and using them, whether it's morning discharges, TT, whatever it is, we're doing all we can on P1s and getting our end of the pathway sorted, as well as helping to project out into the community.
So getting our own house in order, but there are other levers beyond our reach at the moment. Mark?
Mine was a very similar question to what Martin's asked. I mean, I'll take a bit of a different avenue then. Where are we really going to promote the use of virtual walls and technology as part of the solution as well? As to say, how are we making criteria to reside? I guess the broader conversation around digital technology, innovation, virtual wards, at-home care, just to make sure we can get the discharge of patients out of the acute system.
Yeah, for the patients that we are supporting at home through hospital at home, they are a different cohort to the P2, P3 patients. So these are people who need significant amount of rehabilitation and domestic care provision to keep them safe as they re-able at home. So unless we go wholesale into the reablement business ourselves, then we don't have the workforce to do it.
And there could be opportunities through wholly owned subsidiaries, for example, to explore exactly that kind of possibility, couldn't there? Maybe, which has happened in some other parts of the country, yeah.
Definitely.
Mark, I think.
I'm done.
Sue.
Yeah, from the UHBW Quality Committee, we discussed no criteria to reside. And I have to say, I think there's virtually no confidence that we're going to reach 15% in the next year. So, and that is, and I absolutely take on board. I'm looking at Western at 34% at some stage, you know, and yes, they're doing really, really good things like getting our house in order, use of SDEC, early discharge. But how are we going to engage partners when they obviously are not seeing it as the same priority as us? And I go back to what Martin said, how can we legitimately submit a winter plan that says the system is going to comply with 15% when we are sitting here saying that is not achievable, or there is no indication at the minute that that is going to be achievable? That does not sit comfortably.
Certainly, you know, I absolutely take your point on that. And I'm sort of thinking about what Mark said and the sort of wholly owned subsidiary piece. The key for me is what is achievable in a sort of operational and tactical time frame. And a number of those solutions are more strategic time frame solutions. So what can come into play this year? And within that, we know from the diagnostic work that's been undertaken by DAG where some of the system, the majority of the system issues lie. And the fact is our prior diagnostic work, much as we do absolutely have to get our house in order, exist outside of our house. And that's the numbers, that's what's been shown. And so it's definitely for me a case of engagement with system partners. Stop thinking about the diagnostic and the data and start thinking about the solutions to the problems that we now absolutely, I think, know exists. And to do that, as you've said, I think carries at least a significant degree of concern about how as a system we can actually achieve that in this time. So I agree with that. However, we do have to submit a plan, you know, so and that plan has to make some assumptions about what we can deliver as a system. And so for me, it remains the right thing.
I suppose my challenge back is, if they said it was going to be 15% and we didn't achieve it, why are we saying it's going to be 15% again? Yeah. And are they going to test? Because it almost needs to be split, doesn't it? Those that are within our gift and those that are not, because we should be held to account of those that are within our gift. But I suppose I'm just challenging us to say, morally, is it right to submit a plan that says 50 when we know that there is very little?
I think for me, my answer to that, personally, I think, on behalf of everybody, myself, yes, we should, but we should caveat it very heavily with the fact that it's dependent upon the system no criteria to resolve performance. And if you look at the numbers of no criteria to resolve patients, I know in the paper we've got the bed percentage, but actually in the DAG information, they've got the actual numbers. It's just a steady state. It hasn't changed in 2 years. And it clearly needs a different approach. But that is what I think is being brought. So very heavily caveated, cautious optimism that we might find a way to go forward.
And what if we don't have the 15%? Are we actively planning for that? Is there a plan B, I suppose, is one question.
Steve Curry's been doing some analysis looking at how what community bed based here is against the rest of the country community bed based and how we can figure differently. Hoping to bring that piece of work through Jen next week to try to show what some of the options may be where other people are doing things differently. As ever, we need to try and say, well, what is the funding for this then? Because if you're putting another service in place, then it's we need to sort out that funding. But I think we have to put more challenge back into the system. Because I'm thinking that you have got us to here or now, can we, if that's not working, then can we look at this as an alternative where it is working in other places, and why wouldn't we do that?
So Richard, I think you wanted to come in on a similar point, and then I'm going.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, having 100 bed shortfall is an uncomfortable place to be. Going from 22 to 15, and it's been a target forever. Do we need to go from 20? My question is, do we need to go from 22 to 15 to meet that 100 shortfall? Do we need to go from 22 to something else in between to meet that shortfall?
I think that
what is this part that
we get to 15, that'll give us 123 beds across the two.
Right, so what do we need to actually?
Two-thirds of that would get us out of the red escalation. So, if we saw a significant improvement of 3 or 4 points, it would get us just in the right direction, because that would be the 60 or 80 patients. It would.
Yeah, but I can't see us making a 7% reduction, maybe 3 or 4.
Thanks, Ingrid. My comment really is a bit more granular. Neil Darwin and I went around NSK, and they had some, their criteria to reside was more like 40%. When we spoke to the sister, what are the hold-ups? And it was really a process thing. It was the TTAs to take away, was the main aspect of that. So I just wonder, and I know this is going to sound like a little bit of a broken record, but there's an element of our own internal processes. Are we using the patient first team sufficiently to be all over things like that? So there's, I know that's a granular example, microcosm, but there might be 8 or 9 beds there, for example. 2 or 3 of those, and all of a sudden the landscape will look a little bit different. So it's a rhetorical question for here, and I did bring it up at quality. Nick was there, but it just feels, and the person we spoke sort of reeled off all this. This was the reason when we asked about patient first. Yeah, they did initially just started, but it wasn't, in my view, rightly or wrongly, focusing on what really changes the dial immediately, as in now, and the current real problem. So it's just something to highlight. And just the second point from my learned friend, is Serona involved in any discussions at the moment? What are they doing?
I mean, thanks, Sean. I think you know the example. Sorry, you don't care.
Go ahead.
The example you give is an interesting one. But what we actually know is across the piece, those internal process measures are playing a small part in the total local activity reside.
I get that, Stu. If you use patient first in a different way, we do it at MBT. Yours is much more, I feel, embedded and really where it should be. It's a question, it's not a statement, it's a question, are we using it appropriately in those areas that, you know, to tackle the here and now problems? That's been really important.
Well, I won't speak clear. The answer is yes, we are. That's exactly the mechanism.
Yeah, and that's what I expected, because I know how you use the team.
So there may be some targeted areas where we need to show.
Yeah, and it's about understanding what's going on underneath that, not some big hitters.
Broke, maybe another from my own observations.
Yeah.
Maria.
I think there are a number of factors. So we absolutely have to use this winter plan assurance process to really re-emphasise the need for low criteria design to be absolutely top and foremost of people's thinking, because actually I think it sort of goes away until the next session report. We do know that what constitutes a bad winter is not community capacity. There's pictures of ambulances queuing around the block outside an acute hospital. So it really is our chance now to make sure we've got what we need in place and we've had the dialogues. There are going to be a couple of discussions in the next 2 weeks about 1 or 2 things that we could pilot as an acute trust in terms of buying extra capacity in different places going directly. I won't say too much about that at the minute, just as it's an exploratory. We did notice when we had the resident doctor strike, when there was senior decision making, we had much better flow through the hospital. So is there any learnings from those sorts of environments that we might want to employ employees with those of winter? Another factor is the number of mental health patients that are in wards for a very long time. Not necessarily high numbers, but I think it's the pressure on other services that is quite difficult. And I know that, you know, we are trying to talk to mental health partners about what's going on there. So I think at the moment we can't be defensive. We have definitely all seen things that are not quite working as they should do, and those checkpoints and who was checking the checker on some of this and where are the empty beds and how we. There's an awful lot in terms of how we use discharge labs, getting people out before lunchtime. I know we said this before, this obsession of getting people out before lunchtime when we know there's no therapeutic advantage to eating lunch in an NHS hospital. People have gone the night before. So I think these are the ongoing tests that we need to do for ourselves. If someone's waiting for blood tests, that they could come in for the next day or could be, you know, rescheduled for. We really need to be very clear to staff about what our expectations are.
Sarah and then Steve.
Yeah, I think we've partly answered my question. I think Serena will be at the table for discussions, but I'm just interested to know, you mentioned going to Taunton and having these discussions with colleagues across the region. I'm just wondering about kind of where the responsibility sits. We say, unless we have 15%, we can't deliver on it. Where does the responsibility sit for the same to other partners? Come on, how are you going to help this? Regional responsibility.
Currently, it would be nice. I mean, ICB are still the convener of the system. So that would be ways to expect it to take place. I think actually model of an IHO is whereby you contract and you put in your percentage expectations, and I think we probably need to go to the commissioner into contract code, because I think that intention isn't really at
the moment we're still.
Yeah, thank you. Just a few points. I guess it's important not to conflate the internal process with no criteria to reside, whilst they interact with one another. I mean, the issue around stroke, Sean's interesting because actually they do have an important no criteria to reside problem. So, which is having a direct impact on our stroke patients. The fact we can't get TTAs done is absolutely an internal process that needs to be sorted, but they're very, very different. They're very different issues. NBT is using the same methodology as UHPW in terms of every minute matters. That's being rolled out, which is a patient first approach, which will see some improvements. I think just 2 other things really. One is, if we think about pathway 1 patients, 30% are discharged on day 1 when they go into community services. So the assessment of those patients between both Sirona and the acute organisations, as soon as they get home, they actually don't need that care. So that's 30% of activity that is locked in that actually people don't need. So there's something that we need to do with Sirona clinically that says these people can actually go home. The best place for people is their own bed, not extra capacity, but their own bed. And that's what we need to drive to. And I suppose the final thing for me is, in 5 years of being in the system, the criteria to reside has never changed. not stressing it's my fault. But actually there's something about population-based need. We have an increasingly frail, fragile population, and because of cost of living and the like around neglect, we see lots of that coming through our doors. So there's something about population-based health that we need to understand. What is it about our population which is so unique that requires a higher health need? And that's where we're getting into public health and the left shift work. So it feels like that's where we need to accelerate our impetus with our partners to understand how we fix that. Because it hasn't changed in certainly 5 years I've been here, possibly more for everybody else. So the 15% I think is a bit fanciful. We're never going to get there. And I suppose the final thing is the direct impact for our patients is ambulances, queuing, deconditioning of our patients in hospital, falls, pressure ulcers, which in effect is what we have to manage. So we cause harm to our patients because they're not at home being careful where they need to be.
Right. So, to be continued, absolutely. However, I mean, I think we've identified for the longer term some really important strategic opportunities. So one of them is the potential, you were saying about the levers, Glenn, the levers that we would gain if we would become an integrated health organisation are really important, because it would enable us to co-produce with partners different pathways of care and commission differently, to rebalance the health and care ecosystem so that we don't create exactly the harms that speakers just outlined. So I think for the future, we've got that. We've got the possibility also we then touched on earlier. Can we ourselves create organisations that can provide some of this if nobody else has the ability or the capacity locally? I think there's a piece of work for us to do through the joint clinical strategy as well about the left shift and new models of care. So I think all of that is for the future, not going to help us this winter massively. So for this winter, reality seems to be there is very, very limited confidence that we're going to move to 15%, unless something radical changes in the way that the system approaches its thinking in this. Therefore, we need other responses up our sleeves, should that be necessary. In the meantime, and I think this is a conversation for us, what can we do to broker different sorts of conversations with our partners, such as Serona, such as primary care, such as all kinds of people that we need to be talking to, and indeed the ICB itself, because we cannot deliver on what is being asked on others without something shifting this winter. We're being asked to, lucky us, we are being asked to, asking you to delegate responsibility for signing off this plan to myself and Maria, having heard from what the quality outcome and the community has to say about the plan when it sees it. I suppose I am particularly curious when we see that plan, about that second slide, the nice colourful one, about urgent and emergency care plan for winter and the areas of focus for this year. On that chart, what is there that is within our direct grasp and what are we doing about it? So my eye was drawn to things like expansion of urgent care services outside hospitals. Is there anything we can do this year? Question mark. Don't know. But it would be really interesting to see where a state of play about where we are in relation to these lovely colourful boxes and where we need to get to in the future, and what we can do ourselves and what is dependent on partnership with others. So it's going to be an interesting quality committee, yeah, we will be looking carefully at the outcome in terms of the assurance before we can sign off for submission. In good faith. In good faith. That's about as far as we're going to get, no, today. But thank you, colleagues. That's been a really, really honest and useful dialogue and a challenging one, so appreciate it. Are happy to go with the recommendations to delegate authority name to block the have an incident. Great, thank you very much. Let us move on then to the integrated quality of performance report. Okay, I think we're going to kick off as we usually do with responsive element of the report. I'm going to turn to Stu and Lynn, give us thoughts on what we want to pay attention to most today.
Okay, that's good. So, for PW urgent care, I think you can see from the report is a pattern of significant and ongoing good performance. Actually, I think we're doing very well at the moment. Within that, I think it's also true to say there is a higher degree of variability than we might like, especially in terms of ED performance across different sites. And I would want to flag up that, you know, although we have an average handover time of average handover time, I think 26 minutes, 37 minutes, and a modest number of 45-minute breaches, there is very, very significant front door pressure in a number of our sites, and our staff are working incredibly hard to maintain that position. And it is not without risk that we provide that outcome. And the use of corridor care and the use of other escalation areas at the front door, of course, have not got consequences in terms of patient experience and staff experience that I needed to flag up. In terms of elective care, our performance is as documented and remains again a satisfactory position, I would say, overall. Our cancer performance is good, achieving all national standards. I would want to flag up to board that we do have some issues with 2 of our 5 LINACs, and one of which may be out of action for some weeks, pending a very complex part being imported from somewhere, etc. There is therefore some degree of risk associated with our cancer performance over the next few months. If it does dip, we have a recovery plan in place to manage that by December. In terms of the long waits for RTT, that largely sits in dental and paediatric, as previously described, and both women's and children's and surgical divisions have robust plans for delivery against those. For diagnostics, we are on an improving trajectory. As you can see, our current performance is around 86% compliance with the 6-week standard. That is less than MBTs. I'm sure Glenn's going to mention this when we get to it as an outstanding national exemplar. But it is certainly better, for example, on the Southwest average, which is around 76%, the English average is around 78%. And of course, it's not a national standard in year, and is fundamentally, though, measured by the knock-on consequences of RTT and cancer performance, both of which I just described. So overall, I would say from an operational performance perspective, as per the report, that's our situation, and I think actually we're performing under significant strain, especially at the front door, doing well in that context.
Yes, so UEC, as Stu mentioned, diagnostics, we've got less than 1% waiting more than 6 weeks, and we see no issues in maintaining that going forward. From an RTT perspective, we have achieved our trajectory for patients seen in under 18 weeks, so we're at 65.6%. We've got less than 0.5% of patients waiting more than 52 weeks for RTT. We're down to about 160 patients, so we're looking to try and get all of those treated, with the exception of DEPs. We'll have the rest of them cleared by the end of Q2. Cancer, I've talked about briefly before. It is an improving position, but we're still falling short of both the national standards and the trajectory that we submitted as part of planning. But we are working down literally the number of specific patients that we need to treat to get to achieve the targets that we are working on. And Urology is by far our biggest, so it's about 40% of our cancer volume. So if we're not achieving on there, we're never going to achieve it. So we are working with some funding for some additional capacity into that area and work on the processes. So I would expect that to continue to improve. In terms of UEC, during July, the first part of July, we were really performing very poorly. I was supported by our chief nurse and chief medical officer in sort of having a bit of a call to arms with all of our clinical divisions, and we got around that and re-energized our continuous flow model, and that really paid off quickly in the second half of the month. For the month of July, we've achieved a 63.7% for our target, but for August we achieved 67, so sort of 4-point uptick. Similarly, our average ambulance handover time, we improved from June's position of 42 minutes down to 33 minutes in July. We've managed to take that down to 25 minutes in August. So we have seen sort of continued improvement through there. It is quite fragile, and I'm in a similar position here with UHBW. It doesn't take much to tip us over, and we're seeing some of the highest volumes we've ever seen of patients turning up at ED. We had 360 patients one of the days last week. Only time we've hit that level before was in January. So we've never seen that in the summer. And we are bizarrely seeing some quite heavy peaks in ambulance attendances. So we have ambulance conveyances. We had 8 arrive in a 4-hour period, which is about 3 times the normal rate. And the difficulty is if you get 8 ambulances arrive, then it just takes a couple of hours to each one and managed. So there is something around demand is changing that we need to understand. But the continuous flow model is helping create the space we've got that we need within ED. We have a 5-point plan with the Hope Block back in June, I think. One of those is relocating minors. One of them is moving into 7B. So this is taking one of our elective wards, it's taking some elective capacity moved over into the elective centre. So that is now in place, so we have access to those extra beds, which stops us outlying improved benefit playing, making sure that people, patients are receiving care in the right place. So 2 of the 5 things are well underway, and we're working with our clinical colleagues now to start and work on those final 3 aspects to try to hold this improved position and start to build on that through the That's take it.
Unapologetically, I spent a lot more time on the previous item than was scheduled. I'm therefore going to roll this on and then take thoughts and comments on the entire report, if that's okay at the end. So, Steve and Tim, quality.
Yeah, thank you. Just one point from me, which relates to our complaints performance across both organisations, which has seen further deterioration. For MBT, that's one particular service that's driving a number of those complaints. That's sort of the poor response given. And I know that Mark and colleagues have met with that team to find any alternative ways to support them, but also to maintain our expectations about what needs to be delivered for our patients who are raising concerns. I'll keep a close eye on that with Mark over the next 4 weeks. And again, the corporate services transformation work is helping us bring those teams together so that they're learning from one another, but also building capability and capacity across both teams. So there is some work for us to do here, but just to recognise this isn't where I'd expect us to be in terms of feeding back for our patients. PQSM, I think just to note that it's there, it has been detailed fairly coherently through both UHBW COC and NBT COC, so particularly to add around PQSM.
Just for colleagues explaining some of the pictures in the data there. Stroke performance is something which we monitor very carefully as a group. We are now the largest stroke unit in the country, in Bristol. We perform more mechanical thrombectomies than any other unit. and therefore we will continue to be the focus of national attention because of our size and capacity. Just to explain for those of you who are unfamiliar with these numbers and figures in the stroke performance, the reason we took a significant dip in the performance, particularly the time to stroke unit within 4 hours in April 24 was when we transformed the service into a central site based at Southmead, and we proved to be more popular than we believed we would be. And therefore the expected attendances with suspected and real stroke far outstripped the trajectory we had anticipated. Essentially, our stroke unit was overwhelmed and continues to be very challenged in terms of its capacity. And that's largely due back to a question or a discussion we had earlier about no criteria to reside. The tail end of stroke care is extremely important. We can whip the clot out of your blood vessel within an hour, and that's great, and that's very impactful for your survival and functional recovery. But just as important is your rehabilitation and your return to normal activities, and that is an area where we do need, as a region, as a city, to improve that performance, and that will require us to re-examine the capacity of our SARUs. Our rehabilitation units within the community, and to discuss whether they are right-sized and functioning correctly for our patients. So that's a little bit about stroke performance. The other thing to note is that I am really keen to watch what happens with the rollout of care flow medicines management, in particular with regard to medication errors, which is something which exercises me greatly, and also VTE risk assessment and prescribing. So the good news is that CMN rollout at UHBW precedes that at NVT, and we are demonstrating that that is improving the risk assessment, the VT assessments for patients, and something that I'm looking forward to seeing at North Bristol too. What we are seeing, paradoxically, is less prescribing of VTE prophylactic medication for those patients who are enjoying the CMM software. So that's a curiosity, which I've asked for some deeper dive information on. It could be that it's changing the risk threshold to prescribing, or it could be that it's forcing people to not prescribe where appropriate, but we watch that very carefully. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. And so I'm going to move us on to our people, and in the absence of our newly appointed chief people officer, I'm going to hand it to
Yeah, so under people, majority of our scorecard, of course, shows a satisfactory situation in terms of work return, vacancy, sickness, etc. But I won't expand on those. Central training compliance, you'll see, has taken a bit of a dip. There are 2 reasons for that. The first one is an Oliver McGowan training has been added in, and that has had the complexity of that training and the time it takes to do that, that has dropped down the overall performance. Lower delivery of that, all of that is being worked on. And secondly, because in terms of mandatory training, we've really been focused over the last 2 months on delivering our appraisal performance, which I'm going to say is excellent at 91.6 at the appraisal performance at the end of the appraisal period. And that doesn't include some which have been undertaken and not yet quite signed off, so that will increase as those get signed off. But of course, whilst people have been focused on that, the mandatory training has dipped a bit, so we're now focused on mandatory training, but that's all I was going to say.
Thank you very much. Glenn, anything from NBT highlight?
I think I don't see anything else to that is that the increase in vacancy rate is largely due to the fact that we've released more bridges in for the staffing up of the surgical centre, and so we're just ramping up slightly behind that. So it's nice to make it. So.
Thank you. And then finally, finances.
Thank you. The detail in the report shows a position at the end of July 74, where we had an adverse variance of 1.4 million against the deficit plan for the year to date. That 1.4 million is directly attributable to the costs of the industrial action in July. 1.4 million of the 300 million that was reported nationally at the end of last week. We closed the books for month 5 last Friday, so I can provide a bit of an update in terms of latest position. So very pleased to report MBT back on track with a £3.2 million deficit for the year to date. UHBW continues to report that industrial action 800k against the 9.2 million year-to-date deficit plan. The difference between the two organisations is reflects confidence within MBT in terms of the ability to mitigate the cost of that industrial action through internal means. We don't have the same level of confidence at this point in time for UHBW, but we will review that position again at month 6. Both trusts have 3 divisions in some form of escalated financial measures at the moment. Across both organisations, a range of additional workforce and non-pay controls have been implemented over the last couple of months, with a particular focus on those divisions, but applied across the breadth of the organisation. Those additional controls are, of course, subject to a robust EQIA process. Just a few other headlines from the report, and again, I'll use month 5 data where it's available. In terms of savings delivery, MBT off plan by 1.8 million for the year to date, £12 million delivered. UHBW on track at 19 million for the year to date. Cash in both organisations remains very healthy, so MBT 12 million above plan, UHBW 7 million above plan. In terms of capital, the 2 points I wanted to draw attention to, this isn't in the report, but for information, is that we've been able to renegotiate the source of funding to support the capital scheme associated with the reinforced aerated concrete in the eye hospital. So negotiated that over 3 years in line with the scheme. However, we still have an ongoing dialogue with NHSE in terms of the need to do something in light of the funding we've received for the Children and Young Persons Theatre. The last thing I was going to close with was just to recognise that in setting the plan, not only do we have a very stretching efficiency target that ramps up in the back end of the year, we also committed a range of corporate mitigations into the plan in the first instance. Therefore, any issues we see emerging during the course of the year, we have much less scope to cover than in previous financial years. So the link I wanted to make was back to our earlier conversation around no criteria to reside and escalated capacity. And our current estimate is that if escalation remains as it currently is, i.e. worse than the plan we set out, that would have a pressure of around 10 to 11 million pounds across the group. So it's just, in terms of the operational context we discussed earlier, that's sort of seeing the same issue through the financial lens, and of course is a critical aspect of the discussion that we need to have with partners, with the ICB over the next few weeks. I'll close there.
Thank you all very much. And of course, we have also got the very detailed report relating to maternity and perinatal. And having checked in with both COC chairs and SPEED, that has all been thoroughly covered in committee, so I don't think we need to turn our minds to it today. In fact, all these data have been through committees, and we do have the upward report. So in the round, it is for information, but if there are pressing points that people want to bring forward, now is your moment. Roy, and then Richard.
Thank you, Chair. 2 very quick points, if I may have them, both probably clinical. One around around stroke, and Tim mentioned sort of the supply and demand challenge that we've had. That sort of the overall trend, at least in terms of responsiveness, has been going down over the last couple of years. So I guess, especially given some of the real criteria challenges, what assurance can you give us that there will be an upwards trajectory of the NBC responsiveness of our quickly some of these things? That's the first question. And the second one is around the medication errors. There doesn't seem to be an obvious pattern in terms of things going up and down in most trusts. Do you have a sense of, is there something systemic we're seeing, are we not quite sure why we're sort of seeing the variation?
Okay, could I look at look at the second aspect first of all? So the medication errors, because that gets me very excited, so I'll just get that off my chest. So I have to stress, I bring this data to the board because it's an area, it's a quality improvement area for both organisations. But I have to stress that we are incredibly safe organisation compared to national trends. So our rate of our level of medication error is below the national average. The level of harm from those medication errors is very, very small. It's very unusual that we get significant, even moderate harm, and the majority are administrative errors. Perhaps not even indicating a finish date for a medication. That would trigger a medication error. So the first thing is I don't want us to leave this meeting believing we're very unsafe in terms of our prescribing. We are actually safer than the majority of large trusts. It is an interesting area that we are, the reason I'm particularly focused on it is that because of the disparity in the rollout of care flow medicines management across the group. So we've launched it in UHB and W, and now I'm waiting to launch it in keep looking to me for the date in
2 weeks.
2 weeks time at MBT. So we are seeing some opportunities. We are seeing some improvements actually in the UHBW levels of medication errors, and I'm hoping we see those at MBT. So don't get concerned about medication errors. Every medication error is potentially very significant, and we have had deaths associated with inappropriate medication, particularly at the MBT site. So that's why I'm exercising. Stroke is interesting. So there'll be two things really which help us to solve stroke. The largest aspect of that is clearing the exit into the SARU. And I think that we have to seriously have a look at whether we are providing, whether we should, as some places do, provide those SARUs in conjunction, in co-location with our acute stroke unit. So we know that if there is close proximity, geographical proximity, if it is next door or co-located, the flow through that system happens a lot better than if we're actually exporting them to an off-site location. And that's an empty conversation. The second aspect is about the demand management, and we know that a lot of the strokes we see are stroke mimics. So the stroke service sees everything that looks like a stroke, and a large proportion are not actually strokes. And so we're looking at ways, and there is a new piece of technology which just involves CT scanning. It's just interpreting the scanning images, which allows you to triage the non-strokes out much quicker. And working with a national team called the Task Force, one of the trusts, South Meads, one of the trusts working with, we are going to introduce that software, which hopefully takes out the non-strokes at the front door rather than us having to add them to the stroke unit. So there are two elements to it.
Richard, I think you wanted to come.
Yeah, I'm just trying to triangulate some of the information we're now getting weekly, kind of get sort of 4 key statistics which come around weekly, and one of those seems to be a 4-hour performance, particularly for MBT, which kind of showed us not far off the bottom of the total number of accused. But looking at the commentary, doesn't indicate that in terms of what we're showing. I think it shows 109 and 124 on 4-hour performance. I'm just trying to triangulate that with what we're actually saying.
So these are the weekly rankings. I suspect there might be a time lag issue, but can you remember them?
Yes, it also depends on us. So in June and early July, we were performing very poorly. And this is where we then put the reset in and got continuous low going. And so the back end of July, which is, so the July picture that's in the IPR is a bit of a merged positioning. And that's why I gave some August figures, which is the sort of clean thing. So yes, that could well have been the case in June or early July.
We'll see what next week's now.
Thank you. Are we happy to leave this item there as we've exercised our brains about it in other places as well as around spending? So the information is for, paper is for information and note. And very sorry for our colleagues that have joined us. We are running really late, but you're very welcome to join us. So Joy, Dee, Karen and Paul are here for the Learning from Deaths annual report item. Tim, for you to
Thanks, thank you, Lisa. Thanks for our colleagues for coming to support me. I think there are some slides actually just to help us walk through this presentation at pace. Every complaint is a gift, I'm told, and every death is a learning opportunity. And across our group, we hosted just short of 4,000 deaths in 2024 to 25. So there are lots of opportunities for us to learn. It is a regulatory requirement for me to bring to you this report annually. We do cover it quarterly in the Quality Committee, but to bring you an oversight annual report. This is particularly important because a standardised hospital mortality index, which most of you will be familiar with, is a very gross measure of the safety of a hospital in terms of hospital deaths. Learning from Deaths report is a much more granular, and we'll see there is quite a lot in this document, which we promised we won't go through. It's there for your information. There is a lot of information about actual the important learning aspects from those deaths, which have been deemed independently to be cause for some concern. I think this will be increasingly important to boards like this and NHS boards. We are waiting the publication of the Thirlwell recommendations. I'm sure you've all read the Thirlwell inquiry. It's a fascinating read, particularly because Lady Thirlwell did go into some reflection on 30 years of NHS inquiries, including the Bristol Royal Infirmary, Paediatric Cardiac Deaths Inquiry, Patterson, and Mid-Staffs. They were all there in the Thirlwell report. And what she did is she graded how well we had interpreted or enacted the recommendations. And what she found is that less than 10% of the recommendations from those collective 30 years of reports were enacted within the NHS. So I suspect that the Thirlwell inquiry final recommendation will be fairly hard hitting and will cover things such as learning from deaths in quite a lot of detail, as well as many other aspects. So that's why I am keen that we get familiar with learning from deaths as a report, get familiar with the lines of inquiry, and that you as a board get familiar and confidence in being able to ask and probe where you feel there is scope for further detail. So I'll hand over to Karen.
Thank you very much. Can I have the next slide, please? So I am Karen Landry, I'm Associate Medical Director of the HBW. So firstly, I want to acknowledge the wider joint HBW and MDT mortality improvement team, who have contributed enormously to this alignment of reports, and for us at least have produced the most robust and comprehensive learning from deaths report to date. So I'm going to give you 2 minutes from a UHBW perspective, just the key highlights. So the total number of inpatient deaths at UHBW has remained stable in the 24-25 financial year as compared to previously, and the majority of deaths, absolutely as expected, occur within the Bristol Royal Infirmary and Western General Hospital sites, and that is where our inpatients with frail elderly and complex needs are cared for. Crucially, the overarching SHIMI, the standard hospital mortality index, as Tim alluded to, tells us that UHBW remains a safe organisation. It falls within the as expected NHSE range. But going beyond SHIMI, SHIMI tells us nothing about the quality of care that our patients receive. Going beyond SHIMI into the formal learning from death processes, again, I can provide good assurance. So medical examiners as senior independent clinicians scrutinise all of our inpatient deaths and flag cases to us, either to give us positive feedback on the care the patients received, or flag certain mandatory categories such as patients with learning disability for required reviews, or patients where potentially they perceive learning opportunities no lie. What is really important to highlight is that a referral from a medical examiner does not equate to a care concern. It is simply a prompt for us to go and look deeper into those cases. And I can provide assurance that every single one of those medical examiner referrals is looked at on an individual patient basis. And we ensure that learning is
into the correct process, be that patient safety, be that housing complaints, or be that certain what we call structured judgment review, which is a tool for looking at detailed case notes. And for the patients where we felt that was required, you can see in the bottom left corner that nearly 97% of those cases flagged by the medical examiners actually scored care adequate, good or excellent, the vast majority being good or excellent. And there were no deaths assessed as definitely avoidable in that financial year for the UHBW. A couple of other key points, bottom left-hand corner, you can see that we've done quite a lot of really good work around learning disability and autism and end-of-life support for our patients and staff. And then in the top right corner, learning themes and some examples of the key 3 areas: communication, pain management and care coordination that we focused on being the key learning outputs. And then a little snippet in the bottom right-hand corner of anecdotes from what our bereaved family. And there's a lot more of that in a detailed report. And there's lots of planned joint learning, which I know that Paul's going to go into. So I'll hand over to Geordie for the MD team.
Thank you, Karen. Yeah, there you are. So I'm Geordie, I'm Medical Director for Safety and Quality at North Bristol. And you'll be not surprised, hopefully, to see that the slides for both Heath and North Bristol are very similar. I mean, I could say pretty much what Karen had said, is that we remain a safe organization and SHMI is good, which is a good overall indicator of safety of the hospital. I think the achievement part, nearly 98% adequate, good and excellent, I think that should be noted because 2 years ago, it was lower than that. And that sort of reflects on our starting to learn from these and getting the very poor and poor to less than 2% or about 2.3%. I think that's a little bit more to be done there, but certainly there is an improvement in overall adequacy. And I think that gives us some confidence that not only are we looking at things properly, but we are feeding that back to our patient, and therefore the rates are better. There's a lot of assurance. We're reviewing a lot of cases, not all of them, but nearly 8 to 10%, which is what we want to do. And so it's a fair amount of confidence that we're doing things right. Now, as Tim said, that there is the big thing and then there's the granular data within there. So a couple of the focuses which probably are defined more in the report, which is long in detail, is we wanted to make sure that deaths are being reviewed in all specialties at an equal level, because while the overall figure remains 8.5, there's some specialties which are doing much more and some that are doing less. So we want to achieve some consistency around that. And another bit that I wanted to say is that our SJR processes, how we've defined how we do the SJRs, we've refined them based on feedback, so people are happy to do them. And we are being approached nationally to learn from what we have been doing in our mortality improvement program, which Paul will talk a little bit more about. And I think overall things are of reasonable assurance and some progress is being made and much more in continuous improvement. So Paul.
Thanks. So I'm Paul, I'm the Director of Quality Governance for North Bristol Trust, but this programme has been a joint programme over the last year or so now, which is great. So in terms of group, we've been quite ahead of the game on some things, I think, to many other areas coming together. And I think at this time of really big clinical change and the clinical strategy and all the single managed services, as we continue that, I think this oversight of learning from deaths is even more important as the models change. So I'm really pleased that we're ahead of that particular game, and I think other areas of quality it would be great if we could be in a similar place, and we'll have to get there. I'm not going to go through all of this. There's a really good 4-page summary in the papers that just says what's the same, what's different between the two trusts, but most importantly, what we're going to do next. So I'll focus on that right-hand box about what we're going to do next. One of the things, it's the third bullet I'll pick up first, is standardising the medical examiner categorisation and review process. Because what you will have spotted, the eagle-eyed people in the room, is that they're quite different, both trusts. Now, there is a pattern that fluctuates over time, but the difference is this year, they're quite stark. So we've already initiated a project that's going to look really deeply at that, so that we don't just pick a spot point and go, everything's wrong, but we actually really distill and get beneath that and understand why those patterns are different and then answer that. So that's something we would want to come back through, potentially see through to group POC might be the place to take it. But that's important. But beyond that, we need to make sure that we keep aligning, and future joint quarterly reporting to board will become a group report. So this is what you'll see from now on, is that you'll see NBT data, UHPW data, obviously presented side by side in the same way that we've done for the first ever time in this report. And I think that will hopefully then give you some oversight and assurance across both. So probably just stop there because I'm conscious of time.
Thank you. Steve, you want to add?
Oh, no, that's a question.
Come in, yeah.
I guess I'm just curious about the term adequate, good and excellent. And just to get a sense of our level of ambition, because I'm not up for adequate. Not really up for good either, I'm excellent. So if we were to recast the numbers, what's good and excellent and what we aspire to?
So actually, no one knows you because, but you will find out. So no one knows because when the ME programs got set in just around COVID times, no one had set standards. And nationally, there were no standards. So when we started looking at this in a bit more detail, national group. So what we've actually done is through our MI program, and we've set up a national program where all the national leaders or localities sit together. It is a bi-monthly program where we get everyone interested, engaged. So we are setting these standards of conversation as well as all the little bits which are highlighted in the report about how we're doing the STRs, how we're defining mental illness, how we are looking at referral rates, how we are doing all the other programs. So actually, I think being very British, we are quite measured about adequacy. But actually, I think what we're going to achieve in the next year or so is a national exemplar status of how mortality review should be done, not only in hospital, but in communities across the city in a combined way, which integrates with what the ME program is all about.
So I suppose, how do we aspire beyond adequate?
Yeah. I was just going to say, so within the structured judgment reviews, it is a numbered scoring.
Right.
It is incredibly subjective.
Yeah.
And it is, these case reviews are completed by senior clinicians all across the trust.
Yeah.
Some people will always mark adequate if there are no problems.
Right.
Other people will deem care to be excellent for certain subjective reasons. So I think it is hard to tease out the nuances of a 6-point scale.
Yeah, correct. And it's the same with PMRT, isn't it? The Polish mortality review tool, which assesses care in a similar way. So there's some great learning between both of those tools that have been.
But I mean, to add to Karen's detail further, we are actually defining based on some other national standards as to what is adequate, what should be better, what should be excellent.
The NC block standard.
Exactly. So we are setting the standards as to what you can call adequate. So taking as much subjectivity away from it as possible.
Leading the pack. Great. Yeah. Nice. Thank you.
Oh, you don't want your lunch, obviously. Lloyd and Steve.
Thank you, Chair. Karen and Jodie, thank you very much for sharing those numbers. And I'm particularly pleased that you sort of talking about family feedback and sort of making a connection with Congress as well. But I wondered if you could shed a bit more light on how are we learning from the experience of bereaved families, and in some examples of how we've actually integrated them into improving perhaps our comms or things like that. You know, how are we actually using the feedback to improve the patient experience or the family's experience?
So every piece of feedback, as I say, is taken at an individual level, and it is then fed into an appropriate process. So of course, if it is a significant incident, it goes that route. If it is meaningful feedback, which teams can learn from, it is shared with those involved, and then it is fed into the correct sort of steering group. So you'll see one of our big themes, example themes, is end of life care, and at which we don't need as an end of life steering group, and then we have end of life champions across the trust. So there is a process where that goes in, is then looked at. Does that change? For example, we've had examples where it's changed the pro forma, for example, around end of life care, to make sure that certain elements become a higher priority because there's been repeated feedback about a certain element. So it has changed practice, but a lot of the time it is escalated to the correct route and then shared with the champions, ensuring that it reaches ward level frontline clinical staff. That makes sense. So each bit of feedback is not lost.
And if I can add, I think what we also started doing a couple of years ago is asking the PMEs to forward all the positive feedback. So you will see in the report, we mentioned that around 15% of the feedback that the ME receive from, because they are the ones who are interacting with each and every test and signing each and every form, is positive. So a lot of the feedback that we are receiving is positive, which is also fed back. So what we're trying to do is not only say, oh, well, this could have been done better, but actually also amplify all the positive feedback so that it gives people confidence that actually I did that, someone liked it and commented it. So it's more of an incentive to do more of the right things as well. So it's balanced, and it's not only a strict policy, but a lot of positive reinforcement.
I'm just going to pursue the embedding learning, sorry, because I think where it goes to the relevant group, that's great. But how do we get assurance then that the learning is embedded? Do you link them with clinical audit, and also to move it from to whole trust learning? And will we see trend data? Because I can bet my bottom dollar, if you wanted to say what are the 3 things you're going to come up with, 2 of them are going to be communication and probably pain relief. So we want to see improvement. So will we be seeing trend data in these so that we can demonstrate we've learned something, we've embedded it, and the numbers are dropping? Sorry, just.
So it's the biggest challenge, isn't it? So for us at the moment, this represents a phenomenal amount of manual processes. This is not digitalized. We do not have dashboards. This is the future. This is the aspiration. So I can absolutely provide assurance around concerning the elements of feedback, that the actions and learning is all scrutinised, that it all goes into divisions, and it all sits with patient safety teams within divisions. So I can give you that assurance, but I cannot close the loop, and that cannot really be closed until we don't have the manual element or the data collection. That's a UHBW perspective.
I suppose my challenge is that an aspiration? Because it's all very well going into divisions, but we need to have the loop closed so that we can demonstrate.
That's the quality management system that we need to design, which we are doing.
Could I ask a question? And it's about learning disabilities in this. And I ask it partly because earlier we were looking at mandatory training figures, and for Oliver McGann, training of the mental. And then we see in this report that there are things emerging specific to learning disability that we wouldn't be particularly pleased about. And knowing that this group has some of the worst health outcomes and the greatest inequalities of anybody, dying, 20 years younger than everybody else. What focus have we got on this?
Maybe I'll start and then Paul can break it. So at North Bristol, every learning disability that goes through an enhanced STR process. So it's every one of them is looked at in an enhanced way. And we started off by delays in getting those reports done, but the focus has been to catch up with them. So now we are very much caught up with all the enhanced ones as well. We've improved the way these STR are done, so we've designed a new form which makes it much easier to do. You will see some trends, I think, in what you were saying, which are going up. Partly, I would say that's a success, because the reason we are seeing many more of these rates is because we are identifying people with learning disabilities much better now. And all of them are still being reviewed. And the chair for that is held by Katie, and she is really, really good at that. So she will come to every PSAM, we discuss each and every case at the PSAM, which is the highest executive level for even North Bristol. So I think the numbers are going up, but they are more about identification, because we have talked about in much more detail about how we actually identifying people with learning disabilities coming into our trust. So that's the numbers which have gone up. But we've caught up with our trends, and there is a lot of learning which has both in terms of how we make it easier for them to be reviewed, but also to function. For example, bowel care, capacity assessments, and all those things. So it's all work in progress, and we are very, very aware that this group of people continue to have high impact.
Just a couple of things, if I may. So both organisations take this work very seriously. Both have liaison teams, so Serona working inside our organisations. and both organisations have senior posts that are focused on improvement around learning disabilities. I think the other thing I would say is in terms of Oliver McGann training, over 80% of colleagues have done tier 1 in both organisations. It is the slightly more complex tier 2, which is dependent on systems getting together to run that, but that is improving as well. So I was going to mention in the previous item, but thought not, it's come back to bite me. But let's say over 80% of colleagues have done their tier 1 Oliver McGann training. So we, NBT particularly, have taken it very seriously, given that Oliver had his care experience there in South London. So both organisations are very committed.
I can back up what Steve said about level 2, because I've tried to book that training, and it's difficult, even though it says availability, there is, I've eventually got in, but it's not easy.
Yeah, there is some conversation ongoing about whether the group may support the system in level 2 based activity for the next couple of years. So in the spirit of working together, we'll see what we can do to help that.
So thank you, colleagues. Thank you for the work that you've been doing through the year, and thank you to quality committees for overseeing through the year as well. The assurance is great to have, to know that we are safe. Yes, of course, we can always do better, but the safety is there and the learning is happening. Albeit we need to embed and close the loop more effectively, and Steve talked about emerging systems that will help us to do that. So we are being asked to approve the report and to note the ongoing alignment work that Paul highlighted as well between the two trusts. So thank you for the work. Are we happy to approve people? Thank you very much, and thank you for coming. Sorry to have delayed you as well. Okay, Tim, I had to ask for a really focused presentation on
the second piece today, which is about bringing together the two different processes now into one. This is medical revalidation and appraisal. In a nutshell, we are responsible for appraising and revalidating 2,262 doctors. The other doctors, of which there are thousands of them, are medical trainees, and they are revalidated and appraised by NHS England. This board needs to support the chief executive, who has to sign off the annual medical revalidation and appraisal report, and that's what I'm asking you to do today. These figures are exceptionally good. You will notice that there are some people who miss their appraisals. We chase them and bring them back into line. There are people who we allow to miss their appraisal for valid reasons, such as illness and paternal duties and activities, and for some very few other exceptional reasons that we do allow them to miss an annual appraisal, but not a revalidation. We've got a lot of activities going on in the group space now to bring together processes, and it's one of those which is really heartening, because we're taking the best of UHBW and introducing it to NBT, and the best of NBT and introducing it to UHBW. So I'm very confident that this function will be significantly improved as a result of group structure. So I just ask you to support me, to support me in having the confidence to sign off this piece of paper. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions on the paper? Probably the Lord have read it. Sarah?
Just one reflection, and I think with apologies, Tim, because you've heard this from me every year for the last years, we've still got around 10% of people who have an unapproved missed appraisal. I know those numbers have gone down, certainly in NBT, which is really good to see. I'm assuming that you and the colleagues are trying to address those numbers and bring them down further.
Yeah, so we give them, so what we introduced, I think, in the last, well, sort of 9 months actually, is an automated process. So you get 3 reminders before you miss it. So that is helping us to stop the missed appraisals. It takes quite a long time to do an appraisal, as you all know, you have to get quite a lot of feedback, sometimes 360-degree feedback. You need to prepare for it 3 months in advance. And the commonest excuse for missed appraisal is, I didn't realise I had to do it by next week. So by introducing the 6 and 3 and the 6-week reminder, it is helping people to get up to date. And also we NBC, one of the good things was we introduced the appraisal. You had to tick your appraisal to be considered for your uplift in your pay, to put it bluntly, or to receive a discretionary merit award. And that's significantly improved the rate of placement time. So that's something we're looking at mechanisms to do that across the board.
Any other points? In which case we are being asked to approve the statement of compliance. Are we happy to do that? Very much. Onwards, governance and risk. So this is a section in which we've got the upward reports from each of the committees. So I'm just going to ask for comments by exception. Anything from the July Audit Committee in common, which Sean has? Yeah, Sean.
Nothing else other than it's written.
Richard, I think we chaired the July Digital Committee in common. Anything?
Yes, nothing other than what's down there, really just a flag, but we are going to need to replace the big programme by the end of 29.
Okay, thank you. Finance and estates in common, Richard, you chaired that one too. Anything from there we need to highlight?
No, I suspect the big point was looking at the forecast. I suspect Carson will cover that in the update later.
Thank you. People isn't here. I'm not sure if anybody's able to speak to the people committee and just about if there is anything.
I was there. I can't think of anything that springs to mind, Chair. So it's not very helpful, probably, but I was there. Nothing by exception, or there was no dissent, or there was no argy-bargy.
Okay, no worries. Good to know.
It's a good report, I remember that.
So I think we then have the two last separate blocks. So Sarah, anything from MBT? Nothing. And Sue?
No, happy to take it away.
Okay, thank you. So those are all for information and to note. We also have the register of seals to note. Scheme of delegation and standing financial instructions. Neil, anything to bring to our attention, particularly on this?
Well, very quickly, these were approved by the Finance and Estates Committee ahead of coming to the board. We've aligned as much as possible ahead of a change in organisational form. So the two sets, we've had to make sure we highlight any difference. It's a bit of a practical challenge for procurement in particular to make sure they follow the differences, but we've taken it as close as we can at this stage.
The cover sheet shows the changes that have been made, and some of it is just about alignment.
Yeah, I recognise the alignment is a challenge, but I think it would. I personally think it would be helpful if we could just review the business case approval routes for each organisation, because they remain quite different, and more things obviously are going to be approved or approved on a group basis, and therefore the work and process involved in doing it separately continues to be a challenge. So I would just urge us to perhaps have a look at that. And I noticed that some of the terminology and other things has not been updated either. So perhaps it's an additional review could exist to try and, if there was an opportunity to align them closer, that it would be really helpful. I think particularly for those of us who spend a lot of time having to have things approved before we can post it.
Okay, so could we ask for executives to do a further refinement, and particularly looking at the approvals route that you're talking about, and if there is anything material to bring it back? It's just assume, are people happy with it otherwise?
Yes.
Happy to approve. So if there are any more than minor tweaks of that sort, and finally, committee terms of reference and membership, all of which I believe have now gone through each committee. Yes?
So yes, except for the clock one.
Apart from clock. Okay.
And that was the only one I just wanted to comment on first. So I think hopefully everyone will recognise everything there.
membership won't be as a surprise. In terms of reference, our live documents, we can update them if we find gaps, etc. We don't have to commit to them for a predetermined period of time. Just on the QUOC committee, you'll recall that it's the last of our committees to come together, the most complex. I think in looking at the first agenda for the first combined meeting, we've identified a significant amount of business to try and get through in what is quite a short meeting. So I just wanted to flag, I don't have a full answer for you now, but we're going to spend a little bit of time with Kim, Steve, Sarah, and with Sue as well, with chairing the first meeting in common, just to revisit whether we can how we're approaching all those items that need to be dealt with, whether we just need to give ourselves a little bit more time, whether we need to still have a little bit of organisation of specific time, and also there is a piece of work underway at MBT with both performance and quality and experience into one committee at MBT, which we committed to before we came together. What we haven't quite finalised yet is putting in place a fully functioning one-stop shop executive-led quality group, which UHPW already has in place to act as that filter, and so that's having an impact on the combined QUOC work plan. So just to flag that there's still a little bit of work to go there, but in terms of reference, it to go just how the committee operates as to which one of these works.
We always knew it was going to be a tough one, didn't we? And so it is proving. Yeah. Okay, thank you. Any?
Just one question on the appendix, there is the NBT charity committee, and this is just the difference for the UHPW directors or people that come from UHPW. The governance of the NBT charity is different to UHPW charities, and so the NBT is the corporate trustee and the board represents the corporate trustee. And so the board has to approve certain things such as the budget and submitting the annual accounts. And just before the NBT nets disappeared, we got them together to do a review to submit our annual account and report for last year. But we will need to we're trying to light touch the governance as much as we can, so that the charity committee gets all those things delegated to it to act on behalf of the corporate trustee. So we will bring back a proposal on that, but we do need, I think, myself and probably Steve as the two executives, because we continue to serve on that. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other points on the terms of reference and membership?
Got one, as the ICB functions are dispersed or discarded, and I think there are about 18 of them that are going to transfer out to providers, they'll need a place to sit and they'll need some governance around them as well. So they might have to update that.
Absolutely. And by the way, we will send out a separate communication. The NEDs have also been in discussion about the champion roles during that dates as well. So we'll send out a separate email just so that all the board members are conscious of who the champions are, and various required roles like maternity, for example. Okay, thank you. Anything else, or are we happy to approve this? Okay, great, thank you very much. Any other business? It's closed and we will reconvene at 1:30. Thank you all very much.